Good evening, I'm Rob Goldberg, and welcome again to 30 Minutes, a lively talk show when you get to hear from very special Rhode Islanders. And tonight is no exception, for this evening we begin the first of a four-part series, and our guest this evening is a very special man indeed, Ray Eichenbaum. The four-part series, Ray, as you know, is to focus on the Holocaust, and for those people watching this evening who don't know what the Holocaust is, it refers to the period of history when 6 million Jews in Europe and Poland and Eastern Europe were annihilated by the Nazis from the years of 1933 to 1945. And your story is probably not unique, but one that we're very fortunate to get a chance to hear, because at the age of 10, you were living in Poland with your family, and I'm sure you were a 10-year-old like any other 10-year-old who's ever lived, and going to school and enjoying yourself, and your world was turned upside down because when you were 10, the Nazis invaded Poland. So we'll begin our discussion first by telling you how glad we are you're here this evening, and for you to begin by telling us what life was like back in the 1930s in Poland.
Yeah, like you said it so right, that we were sort of a middle-class family. I was born in Lodz, in a big industrial city, to a middle-class family. We had a store. I was the youngest of 3 children. I had an older sister and an older brother. And we used to go to school. The schools were predominantly Jewish, but my sister attended Polish school. And life was kind of mundane, you know. We were a minority. We suffered a little bit. We was no great freedom, but we was happy amongst my family. I recall very warm feeling I get. And this, you know, I was quite good in school, and I remember the 1939 was so sort of sticks in my mind that we said goodbye, you know, when we finished. I think I finished 6th grade and so on, because it was a little different, the school system. And we said goodbye, and we know we were going to go on a summer place, and you will see your friends again in September. But I never saw my friends again in that September, because as of September 1st, everything, my world turned topsy-turvy, you know. And that was in 7 days, the Germans came into Lodz, and we were just completely, first that you notice, you know, in retrospect, is we were deprived of all our civil rights, you know, right away. And that was, you couldn't turn to a policeman, and even if somebody would beat you up, since he knew you were Jewish, he wouldn't do nothing about it.
But at the age of 10, did you say, looking back, you know that you lost your civil rights, but at the age of 10, what did you feel that you lose? Did you lose the privilege of seeing your friends, or from playing, or? Yes,
we were, right away we were discriminated. In other words, unfortunately, the local population sort of gave us, gave us out. In other words, they segregated themselves from us and sort of exposed us to the Germans. You see us being Jewish. I'll give you an example that there was I remember there was a German Wehrmacht car had a flat, and we as boys, you know, we would go and we would look how they do and how they change the flat, the tire, you know, and they got dirty. Matter of fact, we wanted to bring out water for them to wash out, and a Polish boy, he sort of said, you know, they're Jews, and right away they chased us and swore at us, and although we didn't understand. But you see that kind of atmosphere, you know, that we were.
How did you comprehend that? I mean, this obviously. You lived in a country that had a history of hatred towards Jews, and you experienced, I'm sure, little bits and pieces along growing up. But all of a sudden, to be thrust in a situation where you're despised because you're Jewish, did it make you prouder to be a Jew? Did it make you embarrassed, ashamed, worried, scared? What was
there? Were many, many feelings. In other words, we were sort of downtrodden. In other words, we felt sort of like the world abandoned us. That you know, we still. All of a sudden we were like outcasts, you know, and all of us. And for a 10-year-old, it's kind of, I remember really that fearful too, because, you know, the Germans would come in, and I remember one time they took away we had a store, so they took away materials, and they were kind of brutal. And I was holding my mother's hand, and I was shaking like a leaf, because I never experienced such a fear, you know. almost for your life.
What do you remember your parents saying to you at the time of the invasion? Did they try to reassure you? Did they try to explain the situation to you?
Yes, but you know, I was quite a bright boy. I read the papers, and so after being, you know, the Polish sort of propaganda, they thought they were going to compete with the Germans. But you know, and so we were, you know, as a matter of fact, I was those air. We had air, you know, raids and systems and so on, and I was made one of the page boys, and I was quite into it. But this was sort of, I remember when the first bomb dropped, you know, I think it was September 3rd, 1939, and plastered me against the wall right there. All my my enchantment with war came to an abrupt halt, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
What happened next? I know that you and your family were in the ghetto for many years, and that your parents died during that period.
That's right. It was a very, when I recall my total period under the German occupation, the ghetto times are much worse than they got said, than the concentration camp, because it was such a prolonged, you know, such a pernicious type of suffering, you know. In other words, we started off good, and we went to schools yet and so on in the ghetto, and they tightened the squeeze, the screws sort of turned on us. And we were made to work. You know, at the age of 11, I already worked in a factory. I had fast hands. I was working with needles and leather, and I was very proud that I could help the family. And sort of, we still managed to, you know, and we dug into the ground. We put seeds in so we can feed ourselves during the summer, at least with vegetables, you know, and so on. And it got, yet that we were always undernourished, always hungry, you know. And the fight for daily survival, so to speak, in the winter there was no coal, so we would freeze, and people started to get TB, and you could almost tell in the street who was the candidate. We used to call him a clepsydra, used to be on dead notice, you know, like walking in the street. And I remember my parents were very, especially my mother, you know, she would give her food to her children, you know, and yet it was very, so I remember that period as a very, very, you know, much more penetrating into my ego, you know, than even later on.
Did your Judaism have a part to play in this? Rituals, faith in God? Did you try to observe certain things that you had before to keep your spirits high?
Yes, we sort of knew that our cause was right, you know, and you know, we hoped that in the end we'll win, and you know, but I think the religious part, since we saw they picked on the religious people, especially on the Orthodox, and you know, you sort of start to lose it a little bit, because you know, I recall in the ghetto we would try to hide the religious people. Some of them were sort of exhibitionists. They would march in front of the German guards, and we would sort of, you know, hide them, because we knew, because I experienced so much that the German would come out with gasoline and put on the religious people's beards, and they put a flame, and they would, you know, kick him and beat him with the butts of their rifles, and it was really such scenes that I'll never forget. So you see, the religious part was minor in our psyche, so to speak. Although we did even have matzah, you know, for Passover into 1943 yet. And we had a choice you could get bread for your ration or matzah. Not sure, we chose matzah. And wherever you thought of God every day, you know, but you always said, why, you know.
It seems that you already developed a survival instinct. If you knew that to look like a Jew would hurt your chances of survival, and therefore you wanted to try to blend in as much as you can, and you worked in the factory, you had fast hands. The fact is that you already knew that there was ways, there was techniques that you could make it through this. Did you think that? Were you consciously thinking to yourself, I've got to make it through, or did you have a sense that maybe the world's going to fall apart and we're all going to die in this?
No, but I think your nature comes into play. If you're optimistic, if you're born an optimist, you probably stay that way, and that helps a lot. I know my brother wasn't as optimistic as me, and yet, you know, he went into concentration camp. He saved my life twice, you know, really. But I was more optimistic than him. I would perk him up. He needed me, you see, and so on, because I would tell him, you know, we're going to make it, you know.
Do you think that looking back, that's a trait that among survivors is quite common?
I think so. I think so. But as far as religion, we were all Jews. They were just more religious than us.
Right.
And you see, we were we were trying to do this because to protect them physically, you know.
Tell us about your parents and their death and the aftermath, and how you being abandoned, in essence, being such a young child.
My mother was, you know, beside worrying about us and feeding us, etc., and you know, even when you're hungry, the family life is quite different. I remember ladling out the soup like in the evening, how we all sort of watched each other, you know, that everybody should get the same and so on. And my mother naturally got the least. And she worked yet, and she worked in a resort, you know, in a sewing. She was a seamstress, so she worked. And so she was the first one to get weaker. And we noticed that she developed a sort of a furuncle on her back. And my sister was a nurse in the hospital, so she took it to the doctor, and she was a tubercular nature. And then she started to lose it, and she couldn't walk. And I tell you, if there's any heroic deed that I ever ascribed to, is here I was a 10 or 12-year-old boy when my mother passed away, maybe 13 already, and I would go to the resort where I worked, and that was your daily big meal. You got a soup there, and sometimes there was a few potatoes swimming around. And when my mother was sick and she was laying in bed, I would leave out the potatoes and bring it home in my menashka in the pot for her to eat, you know, in the evening. And if this wasn't a sacrifice, nothing was, really.
But your mother was what every mother would do,
Right.
you know, to protect her children first.
And my sister was really heroic. She took her. She didn't want her to die, you know, in my presence, and so she took her to the hospital, and she died of meningitis in the end. I saw her, you know. She didn't recognize me, but she felt, by touch, she still felt me, you know.
Were you allowed to have a proper burial for her?
Yeah, I mean, hundreds of people died the same day. And matter of fact, when I went back to Poland last year, I went to the cemetery, and there was just, you know, they tell you in this area she was buried.
Oh, really?
Because there was only a wooden stick put into the ground, and actually this, over the years, it's become...
What was the reaction of your father at that time?
He was broken. He was broken, and he died 6 months after. He died on a galloping tuberculosis. You never saw sickness like this. A man almost, he changed in our eyes. He just became skin and bones and died within 2 weeks.
I'm sure everyone asked, how could you keep up a faith when you lost your parents at the age of 12? How could you do it, not having enough food to eat?
I think it made us children strong, in my fact, because at this point you saw that people are trying to destroy you, and you become, you know, really strong within yourself, and we said, we got to survive, at least some of us, you know.
Did you ever want to fight back? Did you ever want to, was your anger ever so intense where you just wanted to join a resistance or whatever and fight the next?
If there was an opportunity, we would, but there was really, we were so segregated and so regimented and so kept down, there was not even a chance of that at all. And if somebody knows the history of the large ghetto, you can really read about it. There was not a chance. We were just so, by hunger, by cold, by Rumkowski, by our own leader, we were so kept down that there was not a chance in the world. Some people did try, and they should put a memorial where they used to hang him in the place in Lodge.
Really?
Yeah.
Are there heroes looking back, people that really inspired the people as a whole, and those little things? I know that so often we focus on the death and the destruction, but there were people, I'm sure, that in everyday life were heroes, just like you.
I think my sister was the greatest hero, because she was such a bubbly optimist, and you know, and she would really spread the cheer around in the worst situations, and she was really if I, you know, like you say, I survived. I told you, my brother saved my life in the concentration. Really put his life against mine, and he didn't survive. My sister gave me the aesthetics and because people who ate, you know, dogs and sort of ate dirt, they didn't survive. You survived only by brawn. Some of them did because they were strong, and the other one was by willpower. And I think I survived by willpower alone, I think.
You brought a picture along, which is really one of the only mementos you have of that time. And
and this is a story about it that
Tell us a little bit about it. We're going to show it on the screen.
Good. I never had a picture of my family at all, because, you know, when I came into Auschwitz, they put us into the shower area, and we disrobed and, got rid of our clothes, and only the belt was given us. All our belongings were taken away, never to be seen by us anymore. And actually, I always searched for, even among relatives after the war, for some pictures or so, and I never found one. But when I went last year to Israel, from some Polish archives handed over pictures to the Israeli archives in Akro, and some person from Lodz took this picture, and he sort of recognized Branya too, you see. And matter of fact, one of Branya's, my sister's boyfriend, survived, and there's a whole story about it, but I guess it's long.
We'll move on. So
right, but so I was given that picture, and I tell you, that day I shall never forget until I die. I was like on air, walking,
Yeah,
and,
to see your sister again. What a surprise!
And it's really a historic picture, as I told you. This was the only school still functioning in 1941 in the ghetto of Lodz, just before the Russian-German war broke out. And this was the graduating class, with about 20 Jewish kids, men. And this is this man Rumkowski, who was quite famous, and there's his picture. He thought he was the Kaiser. He was and he was, there's a toast, and this is Branya here. This is my sister. She was 6 years older than me. And
that is special. So now bring us up to date. It's 1944, and you're in one of several concentration camps before the liberation in April. Tell us about those experiences.
It was just pure luck, I tell you, that even now, if I think that how I survived and being small and short, even the initial entry, when I got into Auschwitz, there was a 17-year-old assessment who was segregated us to the left, to the right, if you go to the chambers or to the showers, and I happened to have knickers on, knickerbockers, and one of them cut loose, and when I marched with my brother, and he says, "Haben Sie einen kurzen Fuß? Do you have a shorter leg?" And I say, "Aber nein," and I pulled it up, and he let me go with my brother. Imagine if he didn't.
If he didn't ask the question.
That's right. I would have been a goner. Okay, so just like that, And then we got into the shower room, and I was holding on to a bread I remember from home, and there was a big husky Czech man, Czechoslovakian, and I didn't even understand. But he says, "Give me the bread," but I wouldn't let go of it. So he says, "I'll give you even a bigger bread on the other side," without knowing, But because when you went into the shower, sometimes there was gas, sometimes it was water. You see. So anyway, somehow I got through there. And Auschwitz, you didn't stay there long. It was just like a Dante's Inferno, I remember just that you had to be in selections, selections to
every day?
Work twice a day. And you would sort of run from one yard to one block to a next. This was a good selection and back selection. I was there probably a total of 3 weeks. And one time my brother was selected, and not I. And I was already resigned. I was really, didn't even go for the meal, for the one daily meal. And they took him, and I was really resigned. And imagine he stole himself back. He was already showered and disinfected. He exchanged his clothes with the other man, with another Jew who gladly went on a work transport. And he came back, and next morning he was with me again. I woke up, and there he was. A miracle, like I say.
But you really lived day to day.
Day to day.
And you didn't really, did you think about the future? Did you ever say to yourself, this isn't fair, I'm just a little boy, I have my whole life ahead of me, what are they doing to us?
No, at this juncture, I felt a part of a group. We were just us and them and us, And we knew it all. They were bombing, and we sort of heard that the war was coming near. We actually, when they were bombed, they did bomb, next to Auschwitz, and we were clapping bravo, and we almost got shot by the guards, because Nazis, they were trying to hide, and they were angry. But you see, and then, again, luck. One German didn't want to take me on the selection, and they took my brother again. He was taller and older. And the other one says, "No, take him too, So one says, "Oh no," but the other one says, "Nimm ihm doch, take him," and so I went with him, and I was just like...
It was just luck.
Just luck.
Did you make any friends during that period outside of your brother, or after your brother was killed?
No, it was such a transitory thing. There was Hungarians, different languages, you know, and different Jews, and oh yeah, I had friends from the city and so on, maybe you know, from Lodge and so. But you really were so just like an animal, you know. You know they were gonna get you, and you were trying to just look for the spot or the out.
Believe it or not, we have 10 minutes to go, so I want to move on a little bit.
Sure.
Where did you go after Auschwitz?
After Auschwitz, they sent me to a coal mine in Silesia, which wasn't too far, was still under the auspices of Auschwitz. And over there I worked in a coal mine, and sometimes I worked in the kitchen details, and, you know, and some, you know, work and survival, and there was, again, selections and daily sort of avoiding the, you know, rendezvous with that, and there was, but my brother was a great help to me and so on. And then in beginning of 1945, the Russian army started to come near, so they evacuated this camp and put us on freight cars and dragged us to Mauthausen, to Austria. And that trip was really, you know, like really, I don't know how you survive in an open freight car with snow falling and 150 people and no food for 4 days. But somehow, if the will is there.
What do you remember about the liberation?
Liberation was, I didn't expect, I always imagined that liberation would be like with bands, you know, with something, but it was completely different. There was a group of us, you know, who we were all, you know, just walking death notices. I weighed 52 pounds, and we were very sick. We were dying all over the place, you know. Was in Gunskirchen on a road in Austria, and I came up, and there was no more SS guarding us. That's how we started to crawl to the road from a deep camp, mud and water, and so, and all of a sudden I see a big, tremendously big car, you know, I mean a truck driven by a black man, the first black man that I ever saw, you know, imagine. And he was an American, you know, and he threw me a candy bar, I remember. And somehow the other fellows, there was a warehouse with meat and sugar, and they got to eat this, and they got dysentery. Like I always believed that somehow I was protected. I don't know by who, but somebody watched over me. I crawled to a DP camp where they had a noodle soup with milk, and that was the first meal that I had. And that saved my life too, because, you know, your stomach linings are so, you know, no fat, and you get dysentery. And I think 8 of our 11 fellows that we still held out in Gunskirchen died after the war.
No kidding. Well, that's even more devastating. You make it through the camps and through all of that, and then you end up dying afterwards because of the effects. As we're winding down, I want to talk a little bit about, as now you look back upon this and what you've learned, and obviously how it's changed you as a person. But how do you tell people, how do you explain to people without going through the full story what happened, what that experience was? And I know that the theme is that you never want it to happen again. So imagine that I'm a high school student and you can tell me one thing. What are you going to tell me?
Oh, I'll tell you that that human nature is really funny. There's a potential for bestiality, like the Nazis was, but there's also potential for good. And I think the fact that even myself, coming through such a turmoil, that I still could retain high qualities that I think, I mean, I don't like to praise myself, but I believe in aesthetics and so on, and right and wrong. And there's a message in it that no matter, you know, there's a potential for bad and there's potential for good. And you should learn from me that although I've been through this, all that, but still we can do a lot of good. And by education, by not letting a thing like this happen again, we are sort of on a mission for the future generations that it should not have happened ever again.
I know that there are as many survivors who want to close the door on that chapter of their life and not talk about it, but you, I think, represent a different group of people who want to make sure that the atrocities of that era are never forgotten. And is it because you don't want it to happen again, because you know deep down inside that it could happen at any moment in other parts of the world? And
that's right.
Would you ever imagine that it would happen in America?
No, but probably some Germans could never imagine that it happened in Germany either. You know, it's just you'd be surprised what, like I said, the potential is probably there, and unless we really, legendize the Holocaust, almost a legend which is believed, not as just a legend for triviality, but sort of like David and Goliath or something like that we sort of take it as a cherished truth. And that's what the story of the Holocaust is that you cannot permit yourself to take your brothers and sisters' life that readily. And it's just, even the Germans experience this even now, that it's not, you do it to yourself essentially. And this is really, I sort of feel a mission that since I survived, I have to pass on. It's not fair to my brother, my sister, the others who probably were just as worthy as me, but yet to me just to sort of lock myself into my own box and brood, it would be sort of it wouldn't, no repayment would be egotistical.
Do you feel in some ways that you were almost fortunate to be as young as you were? Young people tend not to be encumbered by a lot of...
I think that I'm just fortunate that besides being a participant that I was over there, that's not it's bad English, I know, but besides participating, I also was an observer. I sort of observed and noticed what happened around me. And yet, this sort of enriched the whole, bad experience for me and let me see the perspective in a proper light, what I think.
And it's often said that a person is always a child when their parents are living. So if I have a 60-year-old mother, I'm still her child, even though I'm older now.
Yeah.
You lost your parents when you were so young. You grew up at that instant. You were no longer a child.
Yes.
I wonder if, and I just want you to imagine for a moment, if you had the opportunity to meet your parents again today, what would you tell them about your life?
I would just say that I wanted to make you proud of me, that your hopes in me were not wasted. And that's how I came through for you.
Yeah. They must have been wonderful people because they gave you things either in genetics or something was passed on to you that gave you that will to survive, and you really seem like a wonderful son. So they would have been proud, wouldn't they, if they saw you here today. And you have a wonderful family and you've done well in your life. We have 1 minute to go. I know that one of the things you and other people have done is to establish in Rhode Island a Holocaust museum. In 30 seconds, just tell us a little bit about it and perhaps how people can get more information.
We work hard for the memorial, and we think it's doing great. We talk to a lot of youngsters, and we exert a great influence on them. And we just hope that we can keep on doing it as long as we can. But even after we go on, that the second generation of people like you and will keep up, so that once we will have this bad model in back of us, we'll do something. In other words, this Holocaust should stand for something positive. It shouldn't be negative, although it's a very negative thing, but it could stand for the betterment of mankind, that it should never happen again. And that's the way we would repay the martyrs, because if this would happen, if some kind of change in the evolution of man would come about because of this, then the loss of all these lives would not have been in vain. And their martyrdom would be at least repaid in a sense for humanity.
A fitting conclusion. Ray, thank you very much. Again, this is the first of a 4-part series, and we're glad that you began it because I think you set a tone.
Between 1933 and 1945, 6 million Jews were systematically slaughtered in Nazi-occupied territories under the leadership of Adolf Hitler. To prevent history from repeating itself, it is necessary to know what really happened. Tonight, a survivor of 5 concentration camps shares his shocking ordeal. Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Lou Palumbo, and this is Close Up. Holocaust is one of the darkest chapters of history. Jews from Eastern Europe were taken from their homes and shipped to concentration camps in and around Germany, where they were forced into hard labor under deplorable conditions. Consequently, more than 6 million Jews met their untimely deaths. Those lucky enough to survive have made it their mission to educate the world about the Holocaust to prevent a reoccurrence. Joining me now is Raymond Eichenbaum, a Providence resident who survived 5 concentration camps. Mr. Eichenbaum, thank you so much for joining me here tonight and for sharing your story. Where were you living at the time? You were in your teens?
That's right. I was living in Lodz, Poland, Lodz, Poland. It's a big industrial town, second largest in Poland. And we were a normal middle-class family, you know. We had a store. I had an older brother and an older sister. And I spoke Polish. I considered myself a Pole. We naturally went to temple on Saturday, etc., but it was quite a normal existence. And then one sunny day in September 1939, everything came to a crashing halt.
That's when the war started.
Right.
And what happened? All of a sudden, the Jews, they were treating the Jews differently.
Oh, right away, you know, we were taken out of the, you know, I tell kids like how everybody says, you know, the cops and so on, what a brutal feeling it is that all of a sudden, even as a child, you have no protection of the law. There's no due process. In other words, we could be playing when the Germans came in with other Polish kids, and all of a sudden if somebody threw a stone at you or gave you a black eye, you could not go to the policeman. He would turn around and you were a different kid. And you were not under the protection of the law.
So
that's an
nowhere
awful
to
brutal
go.
feeling, yeah.
They started closing down synagogues, businesses were closed.
That's right. Right away, you know, the edict after edict came out, and they took away radios and pets, and we couldn't do this and that, and we couldn't go shopping. We had to, all kinds of restrictions right away. But this was still nothing compared to what was to follow.
To what was to come. What about your food? Where did you get your food?
Oh, food, you know, Poland was a rich country in terms of foods. The black soil of Poland provides many, you know,
So you were still able to farm?
No. I mean, I don't know about farming. We lived in a big city. My parents had a dry goods store, you see. But foods were never that
So you had
scarce.
plenty of food.
But all of a sudden, there were, you know, we had to shop only after the Poles shopped, you know, and so on.
So you got the leftovers, so to speak.
That's right.
But that didn't last either.
No, and right away, you know, from September to the next April, 1940, then we were all of a sudden there was a edict, we all have to move into the ghetto.
So you had to leave your homes,
right,
leave all of your possessions?
All of our possessions, whatever you could drag sort of with you. And we were put in an old dilapidated part of town within a fence and sort of locked up, you know, sealed off from the...
Did you think that that was temporary, that there was hope?
Oh, yes, naturally, you know, especially with England and France joined, you know, Poland and Russia. No, Russia came later, but we thought for sure that it's not going to last very long and we'd be liberated and so on. But unfortunately, then we saw the Stukas and the bombers and the great German, you know, the Luftwaffe came and really... You know, as a matter of fact, when you're a kid, you almost look forward to the excitement of war, but when the first bomb hit and sort of plastered me against the wall, I had all my good things about war, you know, stopped right in there. I hope
you'll never forget that.
That's right.
What was all of that like for you? I mean, personally, I'm sure it was so dramatic, but you were separated from your family eventually.
Eventually they died, and we were separated in the concentration camps eventually, yeah, but it was, for me personally, since I was 4 years in that ghetto, the ghetto time is even worse than the concentration camp that followed. Because, you know, it was such a pernicious suffering, you see. In other words, you saw first your grandmother and grandfather die of malnutrition. In other words, we had nothing to eat. In winter, we had no coal to heat the houses. So naturally, the older people died first.
Now, we have a picture, not to interrupt you, but we do have a picture of your sister in the ghetto.
Yes.
And if you want to describe that picture for us.
Sure.
I believe, there we go.
Now, you see, there is a graduating class in the school that we still had in a part of the ghetto. And the man in the middle with we all had the yellow stars, as you see. We wore the U there, says Jew. And this man, his name was M.H. Rumkowski, and he was appointed by the Germans to be our overseer, so to speak. And we still had a school at that point in an older part of town, and this was the only graduating class of that school. And my sister is the one on the right.
The lower
Her name was
right.
Branya. She was 6 years older than myself. And you see Rumkowski's picture is on the wall. And this is a historic picture because this man came to he was destroyed in Auschwitz. But he was a sort of a quisling, if you know, like in Norway. He started out doing good. He wanted to do good. He loved children. And I'm actually a product of his love because he gave us working papers for children to make us get bread ration cards, and that's how we survived. He was never married, and he loved children, but then he did all the German bidding that followed, and that was sort of, we consider him a traitor.
So he became a traitor.
Yes, and the man is really a historical figure, and you know, there's plays being written about him, etc. You know.
So what was it like in the ghetto at that time? You were able to continue going to school.
No. That was only a very brief interlude.
Just
now,
a brief time.
That's right. And starting in June 1941, when the Russian-German war broke out, the school ceased automatically, and we became strictly a working proposition for the Germans. Factories were made and all kinds of workplaces, and we were producing for the Wehrmacht, for the Luftwaffe, for the SS, for everybody. Specialties, watchmakers and bread basket and cannon shells was produced in the ghetto, and they kept us strictly, whatever we produced, then they brought in some food, and strictly was like a mouse in a trap.
You had to work to survive.
That's right.
Emotionally, that must have been very draining, and physically. Now, you had lost most of your family in the ghetto.
Yeah.
You and your brother, did your
And
sister?
my sister, yes.
Okay.
We all went to Auschwitz together, yes.
You did go to Auschwitz together. Your brother saved your life a couple
That's
of
right.
times.
Yeah. He was
Share
a-
those stories with us.
Now, in the ghetto, he was naturally working like me and so on, and he was working metal shop, you know. And when we went to Auschwitz, naturally, in 1944, in August, we were put onto a selection. There was a man called Hans Beboff, and he did the final selection of the Jews that were going to. Some of them remained for a cleanup brigade, you know how it is, and that was the last selection. And the three of us, my sister, and my brother, and myself, we sort of made ourselves presentable.
What were the decisions based upon? How were you able to do that?
What do you mean?
To stay together.
Oh, in the ghetto, we still lived as a family. We still went, you know, we had a house. Then we were sort of, the ghetto was made smaller as the people were put on trains to Auschwitz, you know.
Now, when you got to Auschwitz, were you separated there?
Yes, right away.
You were separated right away.
The men from the women. That's the last time I saw my sister.
Now, Auschwitz was that's really where most of the Jews were killed.
Yes.
It was
I mean,
one of the largest
right.
camps
Well,
where
extermination camp. No, there were some others. There were, you know, Treblinka and Majdanek and Belzec. And matter of fact, there was one right next to Lodz called Helmno, where most of the Jews, before, you know, Auschwitz, they would send them there, and they would gas them in those vans like...
Now, was it true that in Auschwitz they tried to fool you into thinking that you weren't going to die, but then in Treblinka, most of the Jews knew that they were doomed?
Yeah, they did a great job to cover up. Matter of fact, to the last minute almost, we were fooled that we were not going. You know, they are transporting us to a safer places because of bombings from the air, that the Russians are going to bomb us and the Americans are going to bomb us. You know, from the.
So you're being brainwashed.
Right, and finally, you know, the trains, the cattle cars that used to come back from Auschwitz when Eichmann, you know. You probably heard of Adolf Eichmann, and so now he was the arranger of the trains and so on. So the empty cars would come from Auschwitz, and there were finally signs on the walls, you know, scribbled, says, Jews, don't go, you know, death awaits you, and so on. So we already knew, but we were fooled for quite a long time.
You were separated at Auschwitz, and I don't even know, did I allow you to answer the question about how your brother saved your life?
No.
No, we never
So anyway,
finished that.
we got to Auschwitz, and we were put into the gypsy camp. You know, there was a special sort of like a corral, you know, like a Western corral. Just there was a big main avenue in the middle, and the barracks, which were former Polish cavalry barracks, where horses were standing, and that's where we sort of subsisted in Auschwitz. And there were these called selections. That means that German industrialists would come and they would select the slaves for labor, because at that time in 1944 the Germans are being squeezed a little bit about labor, and they had so many Jews to kill that even the ovens in crematorias couldn't keep up. So they would take some of us for labor, okay? So I was a very small, teenager, thin and kind of emaciated by then, and there were selections, and they would come and you had to strip to the waist, and they took my brother, but they didn't take me. So consequently, I was put into a kinderblock, a children's block, and I knew that next day probably I would be gassed and put in the crematoria.
You knew that?
I knew it, and I was I gave up, I really didn't care. And to my surprise, when I woke up next morning, my brother was next to me again. And you have to know that he was disinfected and already put almost on a transport to work, but he missed his brother, his younger brother, and he came back, and he exchanged clothes with the man, and the Germans would have killed him for sure because he was disinfected and we was with lice. They assumed that we had lice, but he exchanged clothes with the man, and he came back to be with me. And by God's mercy or something, 3 days after, we were both selected on a transport to go to a coal mine in Silesia, and that's how I survived Auschwitz.
And you said that you were numbered. In fact, you still have that.
Yes,
I don't know if
yes.
the camera can actually get a shot of your arm, but just be careful with your microphone.
Yes, you see, I don't know, but you see I have a B-10308. My brother Maurice had, wait. See,
There you go. I don't know if they can hear you, though. Let me just move your microphone again. This is...
And my
I'll just
brother
hold it.
had the number B-100307. And you see, as I grew, the number sort of stretched. And there's another story about my brother, which is probably even more. Now, when I was already selected,
Just put that back on.
then we were directed to a prisoner who would put the tattoo on you. He would sort of with a pen, with a hot pen with ink, he would put the tattoo. And there was a German guard, and he didn't believe that a small boy like me could be actually taken to work, so he didn't let me through on the other side. It was like in Disneyland, in Disney World, sort of two roped over area, and there was a little, and it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon in late autumn, and I knew my brother was on the good side to be tattooed, but I was still on the bad side. And he told me, you see, when the guard goes one way, you crawl under between the lines and you try to get over here to me. And as the guard turned, I started to crawl and watch him, and I made it to the other side. And when I got this number, I was in heaven, believe me, because I was
Your ticket
with
to
my
survival.
brother. Yeah.
What was it like in Auschwitz? I'm sure that some of those sights will remain with you forever.
Yeah, Auschwitz was just unbelievable. In other words, like I said, the crematoria there were so many bodies all over that they resorted. The gas chambers were just killing people, and they were laying around. They had to burn the bodies. So it was like in a Greek tragedy. They would put the bodies on wood and with gasoline and like a pyre. They would burn the bodies in addition to the crematoria.
And you would witness this?
Yes, and I saw that. I mean, because when we came in, there was sort of right there, But in Auschwitz, you were like in a maze, like a really trapped, and you had to. Now, another thing that my brother saved me, that he was very keen. Like you had to know where were the good selections. You see, nobody survived Auschwitz. You had to know how to get out, how to get on a work transport. That was the only aim to survive, the only way. So he could smell where were the good selections. There were also bad selections where they selected you because you were sick or you had gold teeth. there were different reasons where they took you as well. There was the bad selections, and you had to be smart to know where the good selections were, you see. And he sort of always, he got me finally to the good selection when he came back, when he, you know, so.
But sadly, he didn't survive, did he?
No, no. I always said that, like, the Almighty didn't want me to see him today. So we were together, you know, when we went to a coal mine in Silesia, and we worked together then. He was already very emaciated. He was working down in a shaft. I was too, but he was, you know, very undernourished, and we used to share our food and, you know, keep ourselves, you know, give pep talks and so on. But then when the Russians came nearer, they took us to Austria. They put us on cars again, walked us for miles and miles across the Oder River. They put us on open freight cars. And I always have a good feeling for the Czech people, because once they put us, we didn't get anything to eat for 36 hours, you know, and they put us in a siding, and all of a sudden, the freight cars were sort of like for cattle. We didn't know what was going on, and the guards, if you lifted your head, they would shoot. It was deep winter, you know, it was like a poetic, like, you know, snow all over and just the train and the guards and the sky. And so all of a sudden, there's warm potatoes were flying in, and that was from the Czech people. Somebody came and threw in boiled potatoes, and that was our only food when we were there on the siding. And then the train started again, and we went to Mauthausen, to Austria. And we were together in Mauthausen for another 3 weeks in another selection, and then they sent him to Ebensee, and they sent me to Melk. And there was another time where he almost saved my life, because I remember when it was deep winter, you know, by that time it was about February 45, and we was on a station, and I was leaving Mauthausen first, and they gave us those thin, you know, the striped clothes that we had, and I was shivering, and first of all I missed him, and I cried, and so don't you think that he took the only jacket that he had, he threw it up to me and then in 1945, when we were liberated, they told me that 2 days before liberation he was killed.
So close.
In
What about your sister?
My sister, I never saw her after Auschwitz, when she went on the women's side, and we just waved and we said goodbye. And then after the war, I met a lady from Lodz. She was with the Polish Jewish girls from Lodz, and she said that Branja was in Stutthof, in a camp in North Germany. Mm-hmm. And she was a nurse even in the ghetto, and there's a, you know, I wrote a play about her, you know, because she was really a heroine in a way.
Well, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to talk about that play and the reason why you're speaking out, the important reason why you're speaking out. I just want to remind our viewers, we are here live tonight. If you have any questions for Mr. Eichenbaum, please feel free to give us a call at 1-800-333-0474. We'll be right back. "30 years ago, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Since that tragic day, a debate has raged over who was responsible for the crime. On Monday, the 30th anniversary of the assassination, Close Up will present a live examination of the facts and myths in the JFK case. And we'll also take your phone calls on the subject. Tune in for Close Up live on Monday, November 22nd at 7 p.m. on TCI's TV2. Have you ever considered adopting a child? There are many older children and children of color available and awaiting adoption. These children need the security of a loving family and stable home environment. If you're interested in more information on making a permanent commitment to a child, please call today. In Massachusetts, the number is 1-800-432-6240. In Rhode Island, dial 401-457-4548.
Hi, everybody. I'm Frank O'Donnell, host of The Laughing Group, which you can see right here on TCI Cablevision Channel 2 every Thursday night at 6, every Friday night at 8, every Saturday night at 10. It's the show that takes the headlines of the day and turns them into punchlines just for you. It's a lot of fun. We got local comedians on. We've got local celebrities like Doug White, Karen Adams, Paul and Al from HJY. Everybody you could possibly want to see except Dancing Bear. We don't have them yet, but we're working on it.
Ring in the holiday season at the Jingle Bell Walk Run for Arthritis, Saturday, December 4th at Lincoln Woods in Lincoln, or Sunday, December 5th at the Riverbend Athletic Club in Peacedale. It's all to raise money and awareness for arthritis. Walk with family, friends, or co-workers. There are incentive prizes, and if you dress in holiday garb, you'll be eligible for the costume competition, too. For more information, call 434-5792. Welcome back to Close Up. We're here live tonight with Raymond Eichenbaum, who survived 5 concentration camps during the Holocaust. The number to call for questions or comments is 1-800-333-0474. Just before the break, we were talking about Raymond's sister. Raymond was explaining that his brother had died, and he had found out some information about your sister.
Yes. I met a Polish, Jewish woman from Lodz. She said, when she heard the name Eichenbaum, she says, you know, I was with Brunja. And she said, yes, we were together in Stutthof. And just when the war was ending, they put us on an old boat, a torpedoed old boat. You know, they put holes in it and put all the Jewish girls from Stutthof, not all, but some, not all, but enough. And they drove the boat out to sea to drown. And the last time my sister was seen, and that woman, you know, she didn't want to reveal because she knew that I was sort of, you know, very much taken in. She says, the last time I saw your sister she was handing out some Jewish girls to some Danish fishermen on a small boat who came and saved some of the girls, but there was no room for her. You know, and that was the last that I know about my sister.
The last that you know of her. When you...
And I wrote to Stutthof and so on they have even a museum there, but they said yes, that Brunja Eichenbaum was here.
Was there.
But they don't know anything about her. And I searched all over, and believe me, she would have searched for me. There was, you know.
What condition were you in at the end of the war?
I weighed 52 pounds, and I had beginning TB, but somehow I survived. I don't know how and by what kind of miracle, but I was always optimistic, and that probably helped me, you know. And I started to recover after 3 months in a lazaret in a hospital in Linz, Austria. And
so what happened? You went to this hospital, and when did you come to the United States?
In 1947 I came, actually, but and I went to a DP camp, you know, in Austria, and I lived there, and you know, slowly I started to get the will to live, and went to school and so on.
Do you ever, in fact, you're a graduate of Hope High School.
Yeah, and URI.
And URI, a Rhode Islander. Do you ever reunite with other survivors?
Oh yes, we had a gathering in 1983. We had a great gathering in Washington, and it was really very touching and very... So wherever we gather, it's just like unbelievable. I heard that the people from the picture, they had a gathering in Jerusalem of the people who went to that school. And I was in a school too. I was the first gymnasium class, you know, I was there too. So supposedly last year they had a reunion. It was just the greatest event ever, because it's like a gift of life, and you meet somebody that was just, you know, on the other side and came back.
Why is it so important for you to speak out?
Oh, essentially that thing like this should never happen again to people. You know, it should never happen again, because it's just undescribable what one group of people can do to another. And really innocent. You say, what did I do? You know, I was a little boy, and I said, now, where is God? I mean, you start questioning your whole being, like, what's the justification of anything? You know, they put you behind wire. They don't give you anything to eat, no opportunity. You're like worse than an animal, you know. So I don't know, but people better change because
But how can people deny that this ever happened?
oh, they have, I guess, if they have the interest to do that, you know. Unfortunately, it probably will happen again if we don't prevent it and we don't speak about it and really expose those people who think, you know, this hoax that it never happened. I mean, it's just, you know, it would mean that all the 6 million died in vain. Like it's just, you know, and you can see right through this that everything that wants to, they wanted to justify you know, why it happened, and if this doesn't work, they wanted to deny it now, you see. So we really feel that we still don't believe that it's going to, you know, that sound people, intelligent people, and all kinds of people will not go for this. And I think the Holocaust Memorial in Washington, which is so successful now, I think proves it. But I can see it in Europe as the countries, you know, are sort of splitting apart, that the old regimes, you know, that like where the fascists or anti-Semites, they would have to destroy the knowledge of the Holocaust before they can go their way again. And I see the sinister implications of the whole thing. So I hope that people everywhere would start waking up to the danger of what this represents.
And I know that the Holocaust wasn't taught to me when I was in high school. Very few history books actually contain the story of the Holocaust. Is there anything being done to change that?
I'm not aware of this that much, but I think that even in Germany that it's now compulsory to study the Holocaust. And I hope that especially in other countries and even here, we have a tendency to, you know, to sort of pass over things that are not so current. But I think that the Holocaust story still is much to be learned from it. And like the historian says, if we don't learn from it, we're bound to do it again. And I hope it never really, if there is a God, and I hope there is, and you know, in my situation, I still believe in God, which is sort of maybe, you know, unusual, but I do believe that there is, what we have to learn from the Holocaust. Maybe if there is a superior power, it points out to us that we can destroy one another if we don't honor life itself, and we allow groups to really start, you know, doing what Hitler did and so on, and sway people to who are armed to just kill the ones who are not. And we see this thing in Bosnia and in Cambodia was thing, but I'm, like I said, I'm optimistic in my nature, so even when they do it, I mean, at least they have this in back of their mind that people know about the Holocaust, and there is a reluctance to do it again, and this is encouraging. In Bosnia, you know, people talk about tribunals where they're going to be, you know, brought to trial, and this is good because if, you know, slowly it's going to seep in that, you know, we cannot do this one to another.
When we come back, we'll talk about some of the events that have taken place locally. And again, feel free to give us a call at 1-800-333-0474. We'll be right back. TCI's Ask the Manager is moving to Monday. It's the live weekly program that gives our subscribers the opportunity to call in and talk to TCI management about their cable questions and comments. Join us for TCI's Ask the Manager, now live every Monday at 6:30 p.m. here on TCI's TV2. How much do you really know about adoption? Whether you're considering adopting a child, volunteering some time to befriend a child, or you're just curious about how it all works, TCI Cablevision's Adopt a Child program is for you. It's a weekly half hour that provides information on adoption, becoming a visiting resource for a child, and spotlights children awaiting adoptive families. TCI's Adopt a Child can be seen Mondays at 8, Fridays at 8:30, Saturdays at 4:30, and Sundays at 2 on TCI's TV2. There are many older children, children of color, and special needs children in our area awaiting adoptive families. In addition to seeking adoptive parents to make a permanent commitment to these children, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families seeks caring adults to volunteer to befriend a child. As a visiting resource, you can volunteer to spend time enriching the life of a child. For information on the adoption and visiting resource programs, call DCYF at 401-457-4548.
Hi, everybody. I'm Frank O'Donnell, host of The Laughing Group, and sitting here right to my right is the chair. Now, this is the chair that you could sit in. Yes, you, the viewers of The Laughing Group, get to sit in this chair if you win our Win the Chair contest. How do you do it? Well, in 25 words or less, you send us an entry that tells us why you should be a member of The Laughing Group. If we think yours is the funniest, you win. You can win the chair and be part of The Laughing Group. Send us your entry today, and we'll have you on before the end of the year.
Welcome back to Close Up. I'm here with Raymond Eichenbaum, who survived 5 concentration camps during the Holocaust. He's here to share his stories with us in hopes that this tragedy does not happen again. If you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call. We're here on a brand new night. It's a Monday night, and hopefully our viewers are getting the message that we are here tonight. 1-800-333-0474 is the number to call. We are here live, so feel free again to call in. Mr. Eichenbaum, after everything that you've gone through, how do you feel toward the Germans?
You know, at first hand, probably you think that I must hate everything about Germany, but it's not so easy. It's not so, you know, it's not so at all. In other words, naturally, I hate the fringes. You know, you hear about the skinheads and the Nazis that are on a rise again, supposedly in Germany. I can hardly believe it, but I'm really upset if it's true. And it must be true if you start reading in the papers almost every day. But yet, I love Beethoven, and I love Schiller and Goethe and all the great things that the Germans did. You got to give them credit. They are a nation of great scientists, of great poets, and great composers. And you know, you see, the pathetic thing is that in my heart I cannot hate blindly the way they hated us, and that's the tragedy of mankind, is that some people hate blindly. I cannot hate blindly, and that's how I feel about Germany. I don't love them particularly, but I have just, you know, I think that mistakes and great crimes were committed over time, and I just hope that for the first time Germany is going to be like the rest of the nations, not so nationalistic, but more economically sort of competitive, and finally see that they have to coexist with others, not just do away with others and be superior. They have to get rid of their superiority sort of complex and live with nations and contribute to the better to the betterment of mankind, not just themselves and just, you know, sort of be high-nosed about things.
There have been some incidents reported locally. In fact, Cumberland High School recently made the news where I guess one of the students there wore a swastika. In fact, you were invited to speak at Cumberland High School.
I did, yes.
Do you feel that these people or the students there really understand what the swastika stands for?
No, I don't think so. I think, you know, our youth is very impressionable, and you know how you and I were maybe the same way. You would like to stick out, and if something new comes on the horizon, and you will look good in front of your peers, in front of girls or for boys or vice versa, you go in for it too. But I warned the students, I said, you know, don't examine what they stand for, especially in political issues, because once you make a step in a political issue, then you're marked for life sometimes, and be careful, and don't be persuaded by demagogues, especially like skinheads. These people probably don't know what they're doing, really, and it's so much against our American way of life, and against we are really superior in our way of life because we give everybody a chance. We are not as nationalistic as some others. We might sort of think that we are on top of the world, but maybe in material sense, which is not in a political sense, which is good. we try to lift up the other people. That's good. But, so I hope that our youth sort of looks at the truth and go and examine things. Examine things, read about it. You take both sides. What do they stand for, and what is as an accepted truth? Or go and examine yourself, and go to Europe, and go to Dachau, or go to Auschwitz, and see, is it true? Look for I always say, how do you negate the arguments? If you go to any cemetery in Europe, almost to a Jewish cemetery, which there's still plenty of, you will see that there's many graves up to the year 939, 1940. What happens to the people then? Those people didn't die. Messiah came already. No Jews died, but you will not find gravestones after that period. And this gives you you see, that's almost like you can prove that the Holocaust did happen, because there's no gravestones after
There's no
1940.
gravestones. When you were speaking to the students, how were they reacting?
In most schools where I speak, we get quite into good question and answer periods, and actually I try to point out to them that all the deniers, I wouldn't even give them, there's many different schools of thought as far as a survivor. Should we even discuss things with the other side, with skinheads and some say no, because you give them a place of honor, sort of, if you even discuss things. But I think that, beside, some people say that a survivor's tears are proof enough to prove that there was a Holocaust. But I think that in a scientific age, in ages to come, we do have to sort of disprove all the shrieks by proofs, and really, it's very easy to do. You see, there is no such thing as being afraid of discussing, and maybe that's my opinion. I hope maybe some smarter people think differently.
What rationale are deniers giving?
The deniers give, like, if you read about it, there's many scientists and people who are out to make a quick buck or sensationalism, to become famous. So just like in psychiatrists, unfortunately you can get always one on either side of the plaintiff or the accused, right? The same thing happens. They find some unscrupulous person who will go to all lengths, and he will, like one person which they give great credence to, went to Auschwitz, and he found a brick supposedly that was in a crematorium, which he carbon dated, and found that it wasn't used or something. So based on this, now maybe the thing was was rebuilt or something. You know how it is with museums. People who make museums probably, but based on this, there is a whole theory that there was no crematoriums and no gas chambers, and they pick on little distortions and half-truths. They just try to get doubts in people's minds. You see, just to disbelieve and just put a seed of distrust or and that's all they need, a little opening, and then they start digging, and actually when the soil is sort of ripe for denial, and then they start building on it. Unfortunately, this happens, like in Slovakia. I heard that all the parties that were even in before Hitler came up on the scene, they are coming back into power now because they think that they can deny that the Holocaust happened there and so on.
But there are so many eyewitness accounts, or even Germans who
wouldn't you think that
have
Germany,
given
they would be the
accounts.
first one to. It's a great stain on Germans' history, and everything is affected in literature and in history. It's a great stain, and it's going to take probably centuries for Germany to get rid of this, not get rid, but to live down this shame and so on, which is, you can understand. And wouldn't Germany deny this themselves? Wouldn't they try to all ends? And now,
Exactly.
Now with the fall of communism, you probably heard that there's more evidence. The Russian evidence is really probably the great, even the Demianu case is proof in
Sure.
point. I'm not saying that everything goes always smooth, I don't feel good for Demianu. He must have been a guard, and he probably but I was all for it, that Israel should not, if
How do you
there's
feel
any
about that
doubt.
case? So you're
I think that the Israelis handled the case well. In other words, if there's any doubt, let not be a stain on us, because, you know, we are stained people the way it is, unfortunately, from history, and we don't need any extra baggage like that, you know. Whatever God will account for is for Demyanuk. If he was a guard or not, it's irrelevant. But in other words, I feel that the Israelis were right, that the Israeli Supreme Court proved that to the world that we are not out for vengeance, we are out for justice.
As far as the Germans go, though, where does one draw the line between obeying the law or obeying one's conscience?
Yes, you see, that's right. I was in the American Army, you know, I'm a Korean War vet, and I remember that when we were given unpleasant duties to do, but we might, you know, you cannot disobey an order. You have to do what you were told. But after you do it, we would go to the IG, to the Inspector General, and say, I'm not going to do it again. You see, and that's where they differ. They took their orders blindly, and they justify that if the Führer says it's right, then it must be so. We are inherently different. We weigh every case on its merits, and is it my duty to do this or so? That's how I felt in the Army, you see.
And these Germans were brainwashed.
Right. I mean, you know, I guess it comes with time. They were always sort of consider themselves superior and always very orderly, which is a credit to them too, in a sense. But they took orders without doubts and without discussing and without merit of the other side, and you know, and this all contributed to this sort of superiority, especially with their initial victories and so on. You know.
Did the Germans show any remorse after the war?
I don't know. I tell you the truth that we went back to my family. I mean, my wife and my son, in this case, we went back to Europe. Didn't go to concentration camps, but we went back to Poland, to my hometown. And we happened to go to Austria. My wife is Austrian. She's from Vienna. So we went to Budapest, you know, not far from Vienna, in Hungary. And there was a little museum, a concentration camp type of, I mean, you know, museum about the Holocaust. And there was a German couple, a young people. And I was in the summer, and the man saw the tattoo on my arm. Mm-hmm. And he bent next to me, and he started to cry. And he felt so sorry. And I took my arm about him, and we cried together. What can I say? I rather meet a repentant German than an obstinate anybody, you know, who says that never happened.
Mr. Eichenbaum, I'm going to take a break, and again, feel free to give us a call at 1-800-333-0474 with any questions you may have. We'll be right back. Years ago, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Since that tragic day, a debate has raged over who was responsible for the crime. On Monday, the 30th anniversary of the assassination, Close Up will present a live examination of the facts and myths in the JFK case. And we'll also take your phone calls on the subject. Tune in for Close Up live on Monday, November 22nd at 7 p.m. on TCI's TV2. Have you ever considered adopting a child? There are many older children and children of color available and awaiting adoption. These children need the security of a loving family and stable home environment. If you're interested in more information on making a permanent commitment to a child, please call today. In Massachusetts, the number is 1-800-432-6240. In Rhode Island, dial 401-457-4548.
Hi, everybody. I'm Frank O'Donnell, host of The Laughing Group, which you can see right here on TCI Cablevision Channel 2 every Thursday night at 6, every Friday night at 8, every Saturday night at 10. It's the show that takes the headlines of the day and turns them into punchlines just for you. It's a lot of fun. We got local comedians on. We've got local celebrities like Doug White, Karen Adams, Paul and Al from HJY. Everybody you could possibly want to see except Dancing Bear. We don't have them yet, but we're working on it.
Ring in the holiday season at the Jingle Bell Walk Run for Arthritis, Saturday, December 4th at Lincoln Woods in Lincoln, or Sunday, December 5th at the Riverbend Athletic Club in Peacedale. It's all to raise money and awareness for arthritis. Walk with family, friends, or co-workers. There are incentive prizes, and if you dress in holiday garb, you'll be eligible for the costume competition, too. For more information, call 434-5792. We're back with Close Up. I'm Mary Lou Palumbo. It's a new night. We're here live on Monday nights beginning tonight. Hopefully those of you who are watching will tell people that we have switched our night, or live night that is. Mr. Raymond Eichenbaum is still here. He's a Holocaust survivor sharing his story in hopes that something like this will never happen again. And he's willing to take your calls. If you'd like to give us a call, the number is 1-800-333-0474. Mr. Eichenbaum, you say you've written a couple of plays about your experiences, and one is going to be read.
Right, December 12th at the JCC at 2 o'clock.
What is the play about?
Oh, it's about, I'd like to tell you that if I'm here alive today, it's not so, I'm the product of my siblings, so to speak. My brother saved my life, like I explained it to you, and he gave me the stamina to go on, and that one of us has to sort of make it, when we were in the camps. My sister gave me the ethical and the moral sort of backbone, and she was 6 years older than myself, and I knew her homework, like, I was very, like kids' brothers are, so in a way, I really worshipped her, she was very bright. She, even the Polish farmers, when we used to go to a summer place, they knew that she was something special. She was into the sciences. She was a biologist. She would have been at the Sorbonne University in France, just when the war started.
Well, you said she was a nurse
she was a nurse in the ghetto, and she saved many a life. So the play is about her, essentially. But naturally, I made it sort of dramatically, the continuity. It's about ecumenism as well. She had a girlfriend named Wanda, Polish, and the two girls, essentially the way the war affected them and what happened. It's fictionalized in spots because you had to make sort of dramatic. But, my aim is to see people that she lived, she existed, that there was a girl named Bronya who was really a fine person, and she perished, but I mean, she stood for something, you see. And that's how it is with many of the 6 million. There were people, individuals with aims and histories and really desires, and they were so beautiful. And
so you said that the play is going to be read on December 12th?
Yeah.
Where is it taking place?
At the Jewish Community Center.
And that's in Providence?
Right,
right.
on Grove Avenue.
Now, if people want to go to, do they have to be invited? Is it open to the public?
No, they just can come, I guess. I don't know if probably the room will be big enough if too many come, but I guess we'll be ready for them.
Now, you said you've written another play as well.
Yeah, my first play was about the man Rumkowski, who you saw in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this man was trampled to death in Auschwitz when he arrived, like us, because although he was king in the ghetto, when he arrived in Auschwitz, he was only a Jew, like any of us. And he was trampled to death because the people who he sent to Auschwitz, some of them were alive and waited for him, you see. So essentially the man never had a trial. And I am giving him in my play a trial, a heavenly trial. In other words, there is an angel prosecutor and an angel defender.
That should be very interesting.
And it's sort of a moral play. I think it has great, deep meaning. And it's, I think this one will be probably shown first. I'm kind of ambitious, although I'm no playwright, I'm a chemist, but I have great hopes.
Speaking of trials, the Nuremberg trials, did you follow them at all when the Nazis were tried?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was just a kid, too. I was 16 when 1940, something like that, when this thing happened, or 17, but I followed as much as I could, and I think that the Allies, you know, they let some people off too easy, but what can they do? You know, at that point, politics comes into play, and you have to understand history. You know.
So you feel that they weren't justified, that the trials.
Oh, I think that the trials were justified. Naturally, they just should have rung the circle up a little bigger. You know, I mean that many people got away, as you probably know. That there were people in France, and many of them went to South America and so on. And Mengele, you know, even Mengele got away, the doctor and so on. And
Do you know of any other major Nazi figures that have not been accounted for?
I think there was a man named Bormann, Hitler's assistant, who was still no whereabouts and so on. And you know, there's probably still many. Well, now probably they are on their dying bed. You know what really puzzles me, that we hear so little about people. You know, we hear from the survivors, but how about the murderers, the perpetrators? Now, a man who's dying, okay, and by the way, I have it in one of my plays. On a deathbed, a man has nothing to lose. He might as well reveal his side of the story, how they did it, and so on. Why are people afraid to come forward? I mean, not to come forward, but at least there's only one story, maybe you read by Mr. Wiesenthal, the Sunflower, where, you know, it's a sort of a story where a Nazi wants to confess before he dies, but during the war, and you know, and so on. But this is fictional, I think. But I really wonder, isn't there anybody dying in Germany now who was a Nazi, who has nothing to lose, and he says, people learn from me, don't do what I did, you see? But I guess that it's not in human nature even to reveal crimes. Maybe you're ashamed for your family or something.
Some of them committed suicide before they went to trial.
Oh, yeah, Goering, and so, you know, he took cyanide, but these were the big shots. But I mean, the perpetrators who did the dirty work, you know, the mass killers, and then some of them must feel repentant, don't you think? I mean, that.
Well, we should hope so. We'll have about 5 minutes left after this last break. Still time to give us a call if you'd like. 1-800-333-0474 is the number. We'll be back. TCI's Ask the Manager is moving to Monday. It's the live weekly program that gives our subscribers the opportunity to call in and talk to TCI management about their cable questions and comments. Join us for TCI's Ask the Manager, now live every Monday at 6:30 p.m. here on TCI's TV2. How much do you really know about adoption? Whether you're considering adopting a child, volunteering some time to befriend a child, or you're just curious about how it all works, TCI Cablevision's Adopt a Child program is for you. It's a weekly half hour that provides information on adoption, becoming a visiting resource for a child, and spotlights children awaiting adoptive families. TCI's Adopt a Child can be seen Mondays at 8, Fridays at 8:30, Saturdays at 4:30, and Sundays at 2 on TCI's TV2. There are many older children, children of color, and special needs children in our area awaiting adoptive families. In addition to seeking adoptive parents to make a permanent commitment to these children, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families seeks caring adults to volunteer to befriend a child. As a visiting resource, you can volunteer to spend time enriching the life of a child. For information on the adoption and visiting resource programs, call DCYF at 401-457-4548.
Hi, everybody. I'm Frank O'Donnell, host of The Laughing Group, and sitting here right to my right is the chair. Now, this is the chair that you could sit in. Yes, you, the viewers of The Laughing Group, get to sit in this chair if you win our Win the Chair contest. How do you do it? Well, in 25 words or less, you send us an entry that tells us why you should be a member of The Laughing Group. If we think yours is the funniest, you win. You can win the chair and be part of The Laughing Group. Send us your entry today, and we'll have you on before the end of the year.
You're tuning in to the final minutes of this edition of Close Up. We are here live, and you can give us a call. Mr. Raymond Eichenbaum is still here, a survivor of the Holocaust. He's willing to talk to you if you'd like to give us a call, 1-800-333-0474. Mr. Eichenbaum, what resources are available if people would like more information on the Holocaust?
Yes, naturally you probably heard of the Washington Holocaust Museum, which is supposedly a great hit, quotation marks. But we also have a local place which we are very proud of, and I was a part of one of the co-founders, and it's located on Elm Grove Avenue in Providence on the east side. It's within the Jewish Community Center of Providence, and it's quite an elaborate place, and many schools and many university students even come, and they learn what there is to learn about the Holocaust. And it's a great value to them and to everybody who is interested, because the Holocaust is something that it's of tremendous value. The survivors like me we just feel so afraid that when we pass from the scene, and that happens very rapidly now, who is going to carry the message? We hope the second generation, our children. However, the children of Americans, everybody tends to forget and sort of blend in. So we are leery. We hope that the message of the Holocaust is not forgotten. We only want people to become better, to become more humane. And that's the only aim that a survivor has, is to teach the next generation what's to learn about this, that we have to be better people. We are our brother's keepers. We cannot allow or do what the others did during the Holocaust. And that's because if we don't we feel like we have a mission. If we don't do it, all the lives that we lost, all our families were lost in vain. That's why we say it should happen never again. Never again. So please come and learn. Come. Learn at the museum, wherever you can, a book or something, but learn and know what happened, so it will never happen again. I beg you.
Do your children take an interest?
Oh, yes. My two sons, they do whatever they can, although one is an engineer, one is in broadcasting, but so far, it sort of takes time to sort of become, they're younger, but generally children of the survivors do very great things.
We have about a minute left, and again, just for our viewers who are watching, do you think you got the message across tonight?
I hope so. I don't pretend to be a great orator, but I speak from my heart, and I hope that you believe me, and that's what I hope came across.
Mr. Eichenbaum, you've been wonderful. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for sharing your story, and hopefully we'll have you back again sometime.
Thank you. I hope.
It's been a pleasure.
That I have contributed, constructively.
And you certainly have. And you are a remarkable man, and I'm glad I got to know you. Next week, we'll be talking about the Kennedy assassination. We will be debating whether or not that was a conspiracy. Hopefully, you'll join us for that. Keep in mind, we do have a brand new night. It's Monday night. We're here live. Ask the Manager is also here live on Monday nights. Tonight, we started with our new schedule. Ask the Manager is on at 6:30, followed by Close Up on Mondays. So hopefully, we'll get our viewership back to Monday nights, and you'll join us for that. I'm Mary Lou Palumbo. That's it for this edition of Close Up. Have a good night. The entire staff was captivated by a guest who appeared in November. Ray Eichenbaum, a survivor of 5 concentration camps, shared his traumatic story of the Holocaust.
To the last minute almost, we were fooled that we were not going, you know, that they are transporting us to a safer places because of bombings from the air, that the Russians are going to bomb us and the Americans are going to bomb us, you know, from the...
So you're being brainwashed.
Right, and finally, you know, the trains, the cattle cars that used to come back from Auschwitz when Eichmann, you know, you probably heard of Adolf Eichmann, and so now he was the arranger of the trains and so on, so that the empty cars would come from Auschwitz, and there were finally signs on the walls, you know, scribbled, says, Jews, this is, don't go, you know, death awaits you, and so on. So we already knew, but we were fooled for quite a long time.
You were separated at Auschwitz, and I don't even know, did I allow you to answer the question about how your brother saved your life?
No.
No, we never
So anyway,
finished
we got to Auschwitz, and we were put into the gypsy camp, you know. There was a special sort of like a corral, you know, like a Western corral, just there was a big main avenue in the middle, and the barracks, which were former Polish cavalry barracks where horses were standing, and that's where we sort of subsisted in Auschwitz. And there were these called selections. That means that German industrialists would come and they would select the slaves for labor, because at that time in 1944 the Germans are being squeezed a little bit about labor, so, and they had so many Jews to kill that even the ovens in crematorias couldn't keep up. So they would take some of us for labor, okay? So I was a very small, you know, teenager, thin and kind of emaciated by then, and there were selections, and they would come and you had to strip to the waist, and they took my brother, but they didn't take me. So consequently I was put into a kinder block, a children's block, and I knew that next day probably I would be gassed and put in the crematoria.
You knew that?
I knew it, and I was sort of, I gave up, you know, I really didn't care. And to my surprise, when I woke up next morning, my brother was next to me again. And you have to know that he was disinfected and already put almost on a transport to work, but he missed his brother, his younger brother, and he came back, and he exchanged clothes with the man, and the Germans would have killed him for sure because he was disinfected and we were with lice. They assumed that we had lice, but he exchanged clothes with the man, and he came back to be with me. And by God's mercy or something, 3 days after, we were both selected on a transport to go to a coal mine in Silesia, and that's how I survived Auschwitz.
And you said that you were numbered. In fact, you still have that.
Yes,
I don't know if
yes.
the camera can actually get a shot of your arm,
We'll
but
try.
just be careful with your microphone.
Yes, you see, I don't know, but you see I have a B-10308. My brother Maurice had, oh no, wait. See,
There
now
you go.
see it.
I don't know if they can hear you, though. Let me just move your microphone again. This is...
And
I'll
my
just
brother
hold it.
had the number B-100307. And you see, as I grew, the number sort of stretched. And there's another story about my brother, which is probably even more. Now, when I was already selected,
Just put that back on.
then we were directed to the prisoner who would put the tattoo on you. You know, he would sort of with a pen, you know, with a hot pen with ink, he would put the tattoo. And there was a German guard, and he didn't believe that a small boy like me could be actually taken to work, so he didn't let me through on the other side. It was like in Disneyland, you know, in Disney World, sort of 2 roped over area, and there was a little, and it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon in late autumn, and I knew my brother was on the good side to be tattooed, but I was still on the bad side. And he told me, you see, when the guard goes one way, you crawl under between the lines and you try to get over here to me. And as the guard turned, I started to crawl and watch him, and I made it to the other side. And when I got this number, I was in heaven, believe me, because I was
Your ticket
with
to
my
survival.
brother. Yeah.
Did the Germans show any remorse after the war?
I don't know. I tell you the truth that we went back to my family. I mean, my wife and my son, in this case, we went back to Europe. Didn't go to concentration camps, but we went back to Poland, to my hometown. And we happened to go to Austria. My wife is Austrian. She's from Vienna. So we went to Budapest, you know, not far from Vienna, in Hungary, and there was a little museum, a concentration camp type of, you know, museum about the Holocaust. And there was a German couple, young people, and it was in the summer, and the man saw the tattoo on my arm, and he bent next to me, and he started to cry, and he felt so sorry. And I took my arm about him, and we cried together. What can I say? I rather meet a repentant German than an obstinate anybody, you know, who says that never happened.
The staff are all very happy that we were given a chance to meet Ray and to hear his poignant plea to remember the Holocaust. Those of us who met him will certainly remember the man and his message. Ray Eichenbaum died unexpectedly in December and will be greatly missed.